Welcome back to shed more light on the developments on the ground. We are very much delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, our economist. Dr. Ghoneim, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, madam.
Thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome.
Dr. Ghoneim, great developments are taking place since the eruption of the war between the United States and Iran and Israel, which started on Saturday. How do you see the repercussions on the ground till this very moment?
Well, actually, I would focus on the speech given yesterday by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi at the iftar of the Egyptian Armed Forces, yes. Where he said that the wars have a very bad effect on the development and on the world economy, on the well-being of the peoples of the world. As we've seen, since the eruption of the armed conflict here in the Middle East, we've seen an increase in the prices of oil. Brent price increased from $64 per barrel before just before the conflict to presently around $80 per barrel, meaning 25%, because we know that the oil prices, they have a so-called risk premium when the geopolitical risks intensify due to tensions and due to armed conflicts. Of course, the risk premium on the oil prices would increase. And the problem here is that this reminds us with the global inflationary wave that hit the world in 2022 after the eruption of the Russian-Ukrainian war. We remember that in the U.S., the inflation reached 9.1%, which was the highest inflation level for 40 years, since 1982, since the tenure of President Ronald Reagan. In the EU, in the European Union, which was the main importer of the Russian fuel, the inflation reached 10.6% in August 2022. Therefore, the repercussions, of course, of the political and armed conflict is expected to have adverse repercussions on the whole world economy, and especially that the Middle East controls more than 25% of the fuel supplies of the world, either petroleum or liquefied natural gas. As we've seen, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, he called on all the parties to get back to the negotiation table and to exercise self-control and to deal wisely with the present conflict, because this will definitely harm the world economy in terms, as I said, of an expected inflation wave, in terms of a reduction in or actually shattering of the investors and consumers' confidence, because we know that in the developed economies like in the U.S., you have an index for confidence of investors as well as consumers. And the reduction of the confidence would lead to a reduction in spending, whether capital spending or consumer spending, and this will definitely reduce the possibilities of the growth of the world economy, and may lead to a stagnation, which combined with the expected inflationary wave can lead to a so-called stagflation of the world economy. And this is what now most of the political and economic analysts are worried about.
Yes. So the repercussion on the oil prices as well, because we are seeing some, of course, volatility and increase due to the eruption of the war, the attacks from Iran against the Gulf states, as well as the threats in the Strait of Hormuz. So how do you see such repercussions on the oil prices as well?
Well, as I told you, madam, the oil prices of Brent crude oil increased from $64 per barrel before the conflict to the present level touching $80 per barrel, which means 25% add on just in a few days since the eruption of the war. Now, we cannot estimate to what extent the oil prices will increase, and let's remember that until now we don't know the time span of the war and the time span of the conflict before all the parties decide to go back to the negotiation table as called by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi yesterday. Therefore, let's all hope that the time span of the conflict will be limited, especially that it will also affect the supply chains and the international trade routes passing through Bab el-Mandeb Straits, Red Sea, and Suez Canal. And as today, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi spoke during his reception of the president or the chairman of the World Bank, that that Egypt suffered from a reduction in the Suez Canal revenues last year due to the Israeli war on Gaza, and now it's expected that we may suffer the same because of the present warfare. So let's all hope that the war would end soon and that peace would prevail.
Yes, indeed. We all hope so, sir. But since you have mentioned the repercussion on the supply chain, to what extent we are alert here because of maybe the disruption of the navigation in the Red Sea and the threats from the Iranian side against in the Strait of Hormuz could be affecting the supply chain, and how that would be felt and in what time frame?
Well, until now, what's obvious for all of us is that the oil prices will increase, and this, of course, will affect the transportation costs and will affect the prices of most of the essential commodities. That's one thing. And the second thing is that the trade routes passing through Bab el-Mandeb Straits and Suez Canal, we should all remember that this trade route hosts more than from 11 to 12% of the international trade, whether it's oil trade or commodities trade. Now, if the trade routes will shift to the Cape of the Good Hope around Africa, of course, this will lead to an increase in the transportation cost, coupled by the increase in price in the prices of oil. This will definitely increase the global inflation, and this will also limit the capabilities of the central banks around the world to reduce interest. We remember that during the Russia-Ukraine war, the interest increased in the U.S. by around 5.5%, and in the European Union by 3.75%, which was at that time considered high spikes. Since then, the Fed in the U.S. and the European Central Bank, they have been trying to reduce the interest rates, but now a lot of analysts, they have doubts regarding the capability of the central banks to reduce interest rates with the expected inflation, because the monetary policy decisions are not only tied to the present inflation, but they are also targeting the expected inflation rates.
Yes. Of course, the attacks are affecting the world markets and the gold prices. So how do you see the repercussion on the international markets and the oil, the gold prices and silver?
Well, it's still premature, actually, to speak about the final repercussions on the capital markets and the gold prices. But initially, we all know that gold is considered to be a safe haven, and that's why gold prices increased just after the eruption of the war. That's one thing, and also the capital markets. But talking about the capital markets, what many analysts expect is that the winners will be the petroleum companies and the arms industry. Of course, their stocks may increase, but the stocks of the other companies may decline because of the increase in the production cost, in the transportation cost, the uncertainty, and the loss of confidence by many investors. That's why it's expected that in the coming week we will see a lot of volatility in the capital markets, where confidence will not be there, and people will revert to safe havens, especially with the increases in the price of gold during the last year.
Yes.
So many investors may also shift to gold, and this may spur another increase in the prices of gold.
Yes, sir. Sir, of course, it is important to think about how to limit the impact of these repercussions on our economy and, of course, on the world economy. From your point of view, how that could be achieved?
Well, actually, our ability to limit the ramifications of the current situation on our economy, we've been working on this since 2014, since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was elected to the presidency of the Republic, through building our infrastructure, which was actually the biggest transformation in our infrastructure since the 19th century, since the reign of Muhammad Ali. That's one thing, and the big mega projects undertaken by the Egyptian government, actually, they were intended to transform the Egyptian economy from a rentier economy into a production-based and service-based economy. And to a great extent, we are now undertaking such shift by encouraging the investment, whether local or foreign investments in the manufacturing industry, and by localizing the inputs of manufacturing industries. But of course, there will be repercussions, let's be frank with ourselves, especially that we still import a large sum of our necessities from abroad. So we always import the inflation, just like what happened after the Russia-Ukraine war. Egypt was actually active in trying to diversify its economy during the last few years, expanding into manufacturing industries, expanding into agriculture. The project of the New Delta on 2.2 million acres in the Western Desert, and the other project of the development of Northern Sinai, covering 620,000 acres, trying to reduce the importation bill in foodstuffs, in the agricultural commodities. This is also another big achievement, and this can reduce the repercussions. But of course, the other sectors that are affected by the geopolitical conflicts and tensions, like tourism, may be affected. Also, the revenues of Suez Canal, like what was indicated today by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi at his reception of the President of the World Bank. So there will be repercussions, but as I said, the projects and the efforts undertaken by Egypt during the previous 10 years will definitely smoothen such repercussions. Just like what we have seen during 2020, during the COVID pandemic, where Egypt was not affected as compared to the other countries. So let's all hope that we can pass all together this tough time.
Yes, and finally, sir, one of the main sectors which was affected, of course, due to the closure of the airspaces was the civil aviation sector. How do you see the impact on this sector of civil aviation and tourism due to the war?
Well, Egypt undertook a lot of investments in the tourism sector during the past few years, and we all remember the opening ceremony of the new Grand Egyptian Museum.
Indeed.
In 2025, the tourism revenues reached around 17.5 billion, which was again a historic record in Egypt. And we were targeting to reach $30 billion in the coming few years. But of course, tourism is one of the sectors that get affected very easily and quickly with the armed conflict. So it's expected, of course, that the revenues of tourism, along with the revenues of Suez Canal, the foreign revenues would decline. But on the other hand, Egypt was able to build a strong and high official reserves in foreign currency during the last few years, especially since the Central Bank of Egypt decided to free float the Egyptian pound and to allow the trade of the foreign currency at the supply and demand price.
Yes, indeed.
In banks in Feb 2024. This increased our, or actually this led to the flow of the foreign currency again into the official channels through banks. And the official reserves of Egypt, it reached $52 billion recently, which was a historic record. It covered around 7.9 months, I think, of imports, and the build-up of such reserves and also our net foreign assets in banks. This is a very important figure. This means that our banks, they have foreign currency owned by them. The foreign currency in the banks, in terms of assets, are more than the foreign currency deposits. This means that these foreign currencies are owned by the banks. This reached $25.5 billion US. So Egypt was building those reserves in expectation, of course, of any kind of shocks. But of course, let's hope that the armed conflict would end soon, so we don't, we and the rest of the world would not suffer much.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, our economist, thank you so much for your precious input. A short break, and after that, we'll be back to continue our special coverage for the war.
International law and international humanitarian law must always be respected. I have condemned